Welcome to the with Wars of History. Let's begin with our first episode. Our first episode is going to be about 6 wars today. Let us get started. Now, this is going to be about the Anglo-Dutch. The Anglo-Zulu War. The Anglo-Zulu. And now I'm going to get this a little started on the Anglo-Zulu War. In the 19th century, South Africa was divided into multiple kingdoms: the British colonies, the Boer kingdoms, and the Zulu kingdom. Also, actually, the Boer republics and the Zulu kingdom. Gold and other precious metals were discovered in the region, and the British were wishing to take over the region so they can make it a federation like Canada. So they were eager to declare war on the Zulu kingdom. War came out when two Zulu women of the Zulu tribe's chief marched into the Zulu areas. They feel apprisal that they were adulterous. So the group of Zulus pursued the women and brought them back to the chief. Meanwhile, they on their way back, they captured a British engineer working beyond the border. He was eventually released, but the British Prime Minister of the British colonies used his border infantry to declare war on the Zulu. He sent an ultimatum to King Control so he can saying that he wanted the land. But he also knew that King Control couldn't accept. Seeing that the ultimatum wasn't sent back, he sent troops and captured Ishawa. He set up camp and then attacked again. While he was setting up another camp, a group of Zulus Zulus killed hundreds of British, making it deadliest time in British history. Beyond that part now, the British begins to extend more. They began to expand. More British were killed. So they began to expand more beyond the region. Just get me a little chance here. So they decided to attack Istandawala. The Istandawala crisis grew, and that instead failed. So they decided to put up a second expedition. The second expedition included the son of Napoleon III. But he too was killed in a skirmish, and with him the House of Bonaparte effectively ended. So according to this, the British march into I believe Istandawala was the capital of the Zulu kingdom. So they marched up again, and this time they crushed the Zulu army, and they even captured King Control and exiled him. And the Zulu kingdom surrendered. And the British colonies annexed the Zulu kingdom, which gave the Boer republics confidence, and they didn't slap no British protection, so the Boer War began a year later. So that concludes the Anglo-Zulu War. Now we have the Irish War of Independence. Now this war is a war between World War I. Now let's get started on that war, shall we? Ireland was a part of the United Kingdom, and they've been fighting for independence. But that fight ended when both sides decided to join World War I and declare war on Germany. So they decided to fight World War I in Germany. But that ended when the Easter Uprising began, and the uprising led by Irish nationalists. And the Irish nationalists were, even though they were later executed, the British still wanted to make the Irish pay, which inspired the Irish more for independence. The RIA led by Michael Collins, established upholding. He burned hundreds. The IRA burned British villages and pro-British villages. Mainly Catholics in the South wanted independence from Britain, but Protestants in the North wanted to stay loyal to Britain. So basically, wanted to started burning pro-British Irish villages. So that's how it pretty much began. According to that, the Irish managed to win independence, and they signed the Anglo-Irish Treaty, saying that Ireland would gain independence, but the north of Ireland will be under in the British House, but under the part of the United Kingdom. Today, that's called Northern Ireland. But then came the Irish Civil War. The Irish Civil War knocked out hundreds, and this was under the Anti-Treaty Association versus the RIA, or the Free Republicans, led by Michael Collins. The Anti-Treaty Association managed to kill Michael Collins, but the RIA managed to win the war. The Irish Civil War came to an end. So that was our second war. So now we have the Turkish War of Independence, which now came to a war between the many countries. Now here is each country has a little upholding in its region. Greece, Armenia, France, and Britain had upholding in the area. And the Ottomans didn't like that. So the Ottomans, led by Mustafa Kemal, decided to delete them altogether. They defeated the French, and the French surrendered. They decided to make peace with the Ottomans, and then the Ottomans turned to Britain. They managed to knock the British out, and they turned over to meet the Armenians. They beat the Armenians. Greece was tough on its enemy, Turkey, so it was hard for them to surrender. So later, after the Turks invaded, pushing them out. They invaded the Turkish-Greek region, and they pushed the Greeks out. And the Greeks had no choice but to surrender. And they signed a treaty saying Muslims would go to Turkey and Christians would go to Greece. So that concludes the Turkish War of Independence. And now we have the Norman invasion, or Norman conquest of England. The Norman conquest of England is a very important one to remember. Also, what it is about is England was under Norman control, and wasn't under Norman control. It was made a republic, and this dynasty called Normandy wanted to expand into England, and they invaded through the north of England, even though they could have invaded through the south. So they just invaded through the north of England, and the English managed to surrender, and the king managed to the king of Normandy crowned himself King of England in Christmas. And after that, he managed to start a genocide. After that, he managed to crush a rebellion led by earls in the south of England, and this would later be into a big, giant Normandy, and Normandy would later conquer Ireland later on. So that concludes the Norman conquest of England. Next, we move on to the Italo-Turkish War. The Italo-Turkish War is a war because Italy wanted to take over Libya, and how to do this what they wanted to do was the Italians want to take over Libya. And it all started what they wanted was Tunisia, but the French beat it to it and invade. Also, the Ottoman Empire was declining, so they knew they could take all of it, and they sent an ultimatum to the Ottomans, blaming them as extremists. Even though the Ottomans were willing to acquire some land of Libya, they wanted to take over the entire region. So war was inevitable, and later on, the Italo-Turkish War began. The Italo-Turkish War was the first use of trench warfare in early carsing planes. And in fact, speaking of planes, the first plane flown was flown by Italian and dropped 2 grenades on Turks in Algeria. And later on, um, they managed to have some resistance in the in Libya. And the Italians did have land. They had Aridia and Somaliland, aka Somalia. Um, so they did have some land, guys. After that, they dropped grenades on Algeria and managed to this. The Ottomans had no choice but to surrender, and they signed a treaty saying Italy would take all of Libya and establish into the Italian Empire / Kingdom of Italy. Moving on, we have the Wars of the Roses, the last one. The Wars of the Roses. Now, the Wars of the Roses were fought between the House of York and the House of Lancaster. Now, this is out of a family tree, and this is after the end of the 100 Years' War. Now, there's the Duke of York and the Duke of Lancaster, and this was basically a big family war. And when I say family war, this is a big war. There's lots of killing and lots of deaths. It was a family tree, even though the king, which was French, and became King of England, he died, and which made his sons on the throne, and he had many houses. They formed alliances with each other and plot enemies against each other. The House of York and the House of Lancaster was the one that declared war on each other. Meanwhile, however, the war came inevitable. The Duke of York died, which made the House of York willing de-century. They were weak. And the House of Lancaster later took over many York regions, and the House of York surrendered. But it sounded like House of York was winning. The House of York was later taking over the House of Lancaster, but that later got on. But the Kingdom of Scotland and the Kingdom of France was helping Lancaster. They managed to beat York, and the House of York surrendered. And that concludes all our wars. This is Maximilian Argenbright. Please subscribe.